The story of Pelican Bay is not a single narrative, but a tapestry woven from thousands of individual threads of confinement, despair, and, for a few, a glimmer of hope. It begins not in a single moment, but in the late 1980s, in a remote corner of Northern California, where a new kind of prison was being built, a supermax, designed to hold the most dangerous criminals, the worst of the worst. This story, let's call it the Concrete Box, follows the experiences of a fictionalized character, Marcus, whose life is a composite of the real experiences of many who were sent to Pelican Bay. The arrival, Marcus, a young man from South Central Los Angeles, was a validated gang member. He wasn't convicted of a violent crime at Pelican Bay, but his gang affiliation, based on a tattoo and a letter found in his cell at another prison, was enough. He was sentenced not to more years, but to an indefinite term in the Security Housing Unit, or SHU. He arrived at Pelican Bay in the early 90s, when the prison was still new and a culture of brutality was rampant. He'd heard the rumors, the gladiator fights guards allegedly staged by releasing rival gang members into the same yard, the constant threat of violence, the psychological games, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of the CHU. His cell was a concrete box, 8 by 10 feet. The bed was a concrete slab with a thin foam pad. There was a sink and a toilet, and 2 small cubes of concrete for a chair and a desk. The cell door was a solid steel plate with a slot for food and a perforated mesh that let in dim, artificial light. There were no windows, no glimpse of the sky, no sense of the outside world. He was in this box for 22.5 hours a day. His only break was a solo recreation period in a slightly larger concrete room, a dog run, with no view and no one to talk to. The silence was the first thing that got to him. Not the total absence of sound, but the quiet hum of the institutional environment, broken only by the distant clatter of keys or a shouted command. The lack of human contact was a profound, suffocating loneliness. The hunger strikes, years turned into a decade, then 2. Marcus lost track of the passage of time. The short periods of time felt like an eternity, and the long periods flew by in an instant. He saw men around him lose their minds, developing paranoia and obsessive rituals. He heard others scream into the void. The psychological toll was a constant, gnawing presence. He and the other men in the SHU, despite their enforced isolation, found ways to communicate. They'd tap on pipes, shout through the steel mesh, and pass coded messages. Over time, they realized they had a common enemy, the system that had trapped them in this limbo. In the early 2010s, a movement began. It started with a few men, then spread like wildfire. They decided to protest the indefinite solitary confinement and the harsh conditions by organizing a hunger strike. It was a risky move, one of their only weapons against the state. The demands were simple but profound. An end to the gang validation system that kept men locked in the SHU indefinitely, more humane living conditions, and the chance for contact with loved ones. The hunger strike of 2011 and its larger follow-up in 2013 were historic. Thousands of prisoners across California joined in solidarity. The men of Pelican Bay, from different races and rival gangs, put aside their differences and united for a common cause. For Marcus, it was a first. He had spent his life in a world defined by divisions, but here, in the darkest place, he found a fragile unity. The slow thaw, the hunger strikes, put a spotlight on Pelican Bay's secret world. Lawsuits and public pressure mounted. The media, activists, and even some politicians began to question the ethics and effectiveness of long-term solitary confinement. The system, slowly, began to bend. In 2015, a landmark legal settlement was reached. It didn't end solitary confinement entirely, but it led to a massive overhaul of the gang validation process and resulted in hundreds of prisoners being released from the SHU back into the general prison population. Marcus was one of them. The day he was released from his concrete box was a sensory overload. He saw a real sky for the first time in over 2 decades. He felt the sun on his skin. He had to learn how to navigate a social world he had been cut off from for so long. The simple act of sitting at a table with other men, of being able to have a conversation, was both a gift and a challenge.